Right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're a little delay getting the technology approximately sorted. I hope it's good enough for sight and sound now. Is the nuclear threat a reality? Do we, those words nuclear and words nuclear and threat tend to go together in people's minds, don't they? How threatening is it, though? And what is it about nuclear and threat? Is it because we know something about it, or because we don't? And what we do know is what you get in the papers and stuff the journalists put out, which isn't necessarily their balanced view of things. If you've ever been to a sports event or something and you see the report of it afterwards, does it always match what you saw? Not necessarily, in my experience. Anyway, but for practical purposes, the journalist does tend to put together nuclear and atomic as meaning the same thing. You know, nuclear power, atomic power, or nuclear bombs, atomic bombs. Essentially, it's the same thing. The nuclear bit is simply the nucleus is essentially the atom. But the problem with nuclear as well is the way it's gone historically was before, a century ago, it wasn't even realised that potential was there to harness these forces within the atom to get massive release of energy very quickly. And the result of that was either, well, the first thing was, as soon as we've got this repeating thing that will build up, we'll make a bomb, blow people apart. We've got a war coming, let's have this weapon before they do. But the other side that was, I suppose, at the back of people's minds, certainly came to the forefront, that supposedly finished, was what about a civil use for this, something that will help people? Let's use the heat to make electricity and keep the lights on, the power is on. Because after all, uranium's not a lot of use for anything else. It's quite heavy. They've used it in missile shells before now. Yeah, just straightforward stuff fired miles at the opposition. But uranium can be used for this power source. And the difference is between the two is civil is building up your power to get a position where you're in feedback, but you're in balance. So for every neutron strikes another, causes another neutron to fall, and they build up. And you can increase the power in the reactor if you pull your controls out and put it in to calm it down. You build up to a nice power level, heat your water, drive your turbine, just like the end result of a coal-fired station, where you burn coal to make heat and form steam and drive a turbine. So that side is very similar, but you're aiming to have this balance point with the civil side. Whereas with a bomb, what you want to do is get this process working, confine it for as long as you possibly can while it's running away, and then it goes bang and causes a big blast. And we have an exhibit here, Hiroshima Jam Jar. And passed this morning. Apparently, this was found in the debris of when the Hiroshima bomb was dropped in 1945. They reckon the temperature of about 1500 centigrade caused that. And when they looked at it scientifically, they concluded that, quote here, a virtually instantaneous heat wave struck this object and passed through as quickly as it had arrived, so the jar resumed its solidified form. So it melted, sagged a bit, and froze again very quickly, solidified without leaving any stress marks in it. That's quite remarkable. That's what military use can do. And the civil side of things, if you like, is where this for talking about civil. Yes. I think I've actually said most of this stuff. Where's that going? Come along. It's supposed to be a slide come up now showing the civil side. I've got this out. It doesn't. No. I was going to show them a picture of a local power station as well.
I don't know why, but this was working really well before. I know you don't believe me. I know you don't believe me, but I don't understand this. Let's start again.
This is a little olive thing. I'll tell you the civil side of things. The United Kingdom has had civil power stations running since 1962, supplying electricity to the national grid. The first one to get on the bars, as they call it, was by Shorthead, the one at Berkeley, which used to be operating up across the river and up a bit from here. Safe commercial nuclear power, we hope. Well, it always has been. Berkeley ran from 1962 through to 1989. So it was first on the bars by Shorthead from Bradwell over in Essex, and they've been competing and running neck and neck to see who could get it built, commissioned, approved, and everything and on. Berkeley was the first to do it just. I think that is actually a picture of the site. The perimeter fence removed and shut down, but still awaiting sort of final taking apart. And I think now, if you went there now, it's basically a big concrete block covering over the middle bit. Boilers and everything have all been taken away. But in its time, it ran really well. And you used to have to get a license from the government. Teams of people to vet your application to renew your license. And part of that was that reactor 1 for 1 year will be shut down and examined. So done. Reactor 2 the next year, alternated one each year, and you had to get through all the various techniques, or they wouldn't let you start up again. And ultimately, that was what shut it down. There's 8 boilers on each reactor. There's 5 each, don't they? Only big. They would have checks done as well. And it was becoming so time-consuming and expensive. The decision was made, this isn't economic to continue. So Berkeley was first to be shut down, I think, as well. But the various others, technical design was shut down further on. And there's one in Wales, Drarsfynnydd, which has gone as well now. But that was how it was. Everything was covered very carefully. But you need, obviously, each commercial power station needs to manage itself as safely as it can, because it obviously has to continue making money for its owners ultimately. Because there's no justification for it, you could say. And then you obviously got to be people have got to be comfortable with the nuclear power in their locality, and those sorts of things. But even a major disruption, we've had a few, as we know. The effect on the work, it's fairly minimal, really, because the weather systems do distribute things quite well. And they happen once in a while. You get devastation, loss of life locally, which is unfortunate. But Chernobyl is the only one where you've really had any loss of life on disruption basis. But of course, then there's the military side of it. Military, the bad guys. That was a good guy. RLI. The military, of course, ever since the first ones in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that potential's been there. You had the Cold War, as it was called back in the 40s and 50s, where everyone was doing nuclear tests and things. That was going to come up. Yes, we've got safe power there. Now we have Putin. When shall we bomb you? That was a bomb test in the 50s. One of the islands in the Pacific was blown up. And that was the result. And of course, you've got the US and the USSR as it was then, and UK probably joining in. If the whole lot had been throwing bombs at each other, which was the worry at the time, you'd have what was called mutually assured destruction, because there was no way you could knock out these things once they were in flight. They'd come through. So if we shot at them, they'd shoot at us and wipe out all the population on the Earth. was the worry. And they had a Cuba missile crisis in 1963. You may have heard of it. It was basically that Cuba was communist and wanted to have Russian nuclear weapons on their territory within 90 miles of US landmass, which unsurprisingly the US are not very happy about. So they sent their fleet out to stop the Russians, and there was this confrontation threatening in the Atlantic. In the end, the Russians, with them, there was diplomacy going on as well. They did in the end go back. But that is what keeps us away from that. We've obviously got threats of that in Ukraine today. We know Israel's not very popular with its neighbours, and there's threats there of weapons being used, and would nuclear be used? We don't know. It hinges on the skill and diplomacy and determination of human world leaders. Is that a recipe for success or disaster? I'll leave you to consider. We'll put that away for the moment, and we'll see if this will move on. Here we are. Right. Back to civil. A few instances we've had problems. That is a plan view of Fukushima before the incident in 2011. They had a good design, and they know in Japan that they get eruptions, they get tsunamis, they get earth movement. They design for that. And if they've got early warning, which they had for this tsunami, they knew to shut down the reactors so that the nuclear reaction isn't going on. So that was fun. That shut down. But the trouble with nuclear is you've got residual heat. If you burn your coal fire, everybody did. You burn your coal in the day, so you have a nice hot house, and you damp down your fire at night. By the morning, it's cooled down, it's gone cold. Nuclear doesn't work quite like that. You do shut down, and the power rating does drop rapidly down a few percent from what it started from. Then it doesn't drop to nothing. It stays at that sort of level or gradually decaying away. But you've still got to take away that decay heat. And the cooling plant from nearest to the sea was there to take away this residual heat, decay heat, I call it. And unfortunately, there was an exceptionally high tsunami came through. And the problem with that was that it didn't just wash through and that was the end of it. It was an exceptionally high one of about 14 metres or 46 foot. It was quite twice the height of this building. It's twice the height of most houses. And it flooded everything, including the cooling at the bottom there, the backup cooling systems. So they were knocked out completely. Not even power supply to them, not even backup generation for a good while. So the cores started heating up on the reactors again and got to a rather unsafe situation. Too much water flooded them, which is rather unfortunate. But at the end of the day, it was relatively. Nobody, as far as I know, was actually killed. Imagine everybody got out when the water was coming. The sea would then have some contamination seeping out into it, which the people called in to deal with this emergency were required to contain as much as they could and would have done their best to do so. So not too much danger really for people in terms of what they might suffer afterwards as a consequence. And there'll be extremely detailed and copious monitoring of everybody afterwards, I'm sure, to see whether there is any hint of higher incidence of cancers and like that. Now, we'll have the big one next. That's a few days after Chernobyl happened, but it didn't go wrong here. It was an unsafe design to start with as far as Britain was concerned. I worked at Berkeley Power Station in 74 to 82. So although I wasn't working there anymore, I was still in the field of power stations. So I was very interested to see what came out of this in terms of any technical reports and stuff later on. Turns out that Britain wouldn't have built anything like that. We had a reactor with graphite cores. In fact, the Berkeley one and all its companions were based on graphite. But we used carbon dioxide gas to cool it. This one was cooled with water, which technically is much more difficult to control in terms of timescales. And got that problem building up. And I get the impression as well from things I've read that the operators knew what to do up to a point. They had orders to follow, rules they followed. This seems to be quite a prevalent USSR mindset, and Russia seems to have that attitude, if that isn't too political a statement. So we've got people who obey what they're told to do, and if it's different, they've been told they've got to do this test, so they're going to do this test at low power, held on much longer than it normally would have been before, and about 20 hours into the incident, dropping power, they were trying to control it and they couldn't, and it ran away basically, and then that set off a whole chain of things where metal melted and reacted with water for hydrogen, and hydrogen exploded and blew the lid off basically. And then this sort of stream of like the fireworks going off into the sky was reported. Like there were 1 or 2 people survived this, although they got quite high doses, who were working on the site at the time. And that was a testimony. One of them was going, all this bright stuff was going up into the night sky, and then you had they couldn't keep control anymore, so of course it was running away. And yeah, if only they'd known. Never mind. It's the devastation several days on, for a good few days, roughly blowing in there. Not because it was burning so much, but it gets very hot. There's nuclear grade core graphite. It doesn't burn too readily, just singes around the edges, I suppose, is the best description. But it was his own publicity. It was the first people to know about Chernobyl. Russians were trying to calm it down, shut it down as fast as they could and stop it producing any more contamination. But of course, the stuff's gone right up into the atmosphere, stratosphere quite possibly, heading off in whatever direction the wind took it. And the wind took it northish direction. And a day or so later, I think it was, there was a Swedish power station. All nuclear, they had a nuclear station. All nuclear stations, part of their safety and so on, is to have measurements all around the site. So if the site had a release of nuclear material, you get high radiation readings. Well, they started getting high readings. They thought, well, what is this? So they sampled, getting, and this is the sort of isotopes you get when fuel elements are broken up. We haven't had any fuel elements broken up. Where's this come from? So they backtracked the weather, worked out that it must have come from Chernobyl, thereabouts. And of course, Sapor picked up this glowing graphite core. They still hadn't shut it down at that stage. So the whole world knew. Yes, too late, isn't it? Too late now. It's all blown up like that, and the world knows. So anyway, what about God's point of view on this? Because that's what we forget. God has a viewpoint on this. People He's put on earth, and the Bible He's caused us to written, has written for us, so we can get a sense of proportion of how we should do these things and how we should use them. in the first chapter of Genesis, there you are, in the first book, first man and woman are created, and in first chapter, verse 28, that word subdue is the key one, I think. Man and woman are told to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. Unfortunately, they are also given a basic command which they disobeyed, which is basically what sin is. Having failed to keep it, they were thrown out of their garden. And in chapter 4, we read about the beginnings of technology. That might sound a big word, but I've heard that described by a primary school teacher to a group of 6 or 7 year olds as, what's technology? Making things. So they make things in a small way, and then they make things in a bigger way. You perhaps know people who've got very keen, very practical, can do all sorts of things. That's basically what they're doing with technology in the form. And if we go on to Job, let's have a look. Yes, there we are. Job chapter 28, we read about silver being mined, find the veins of silver, find where gold, get iron and bronze or brass, as it was 400 years ago. And that is man subduing the earth to use it. Further on in that chapter, we read about man putting forth his hand upon the rock. He overturns mountains by the roots. That sounds a bit like the widening of the A465 that's currently going on, the earth moving that's going on there. He cutteth out rivers among the rocks. His eye seeth every precious thing. So, people doing that, we don't actually read of man being condemned for doing that, and he is subduing the earth in that way. And we also read in Exodus chapter 35, I think. Oh, yeah, that's right. Right. Now, this is the next bit, because when God's got his chosen people in the wilderness, he wants Bezalel, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, to do all sorts of things for him, build stuff. So that's happening with God's directive. And he's given Aholiab, that's right, of the tribe of Dan, to help. He's more into embroidering and engraving and using materials rather than using metals. That was people doing some quite significant and intricate technical work at the direction of God. So God doesn't condemn technology as such, but he wants to know what people's motives are for making things. Wise, curious works, to work in gold, silver and bronze, and cutting of stones and carving wood, making all manner of cunning work. That's what Bezalel does. We forget just how fragile our earth is, really. Crust is only about 0.5% of the Earth's diameter. That's the solid bit in the little cutaway there of the Earth. You've got the inner the crust, the mantle underneath it, which is to start with a sort of bitumeny, tarry, sloppy sort of stuff. It gets more liquid as you get more towards the core of the Earth, and the outer are metals, move around, and that's where our magnetic fields come from. You can set your compass by. But it's very thin, only a fraction of a cent. And it's only in the last 50 years or so they've realised that our Earth's crust isn't a single crust, and it's made up of various plates that are jostling against each other, moving around. And volcanic action tends to be where the plates are jostling, or there's a flaw somewhere. Volcanic material will erupt now and again, or just occasionally a mountain will blow its top, as Mount St. Helens did in 1980. So the Earth is relatively fragile. Whatever we build is going to be subject to all these Earth movements. And the Japanese tried to account for that as best they can with their volcanic tsunamis and such through. But all it does is it indicates the vulnerability of And God does occasionally make some new thing. But more to the point is, he's warned us that there's a time to come when he's going to interrupt man's selfish use of resources, and then he'll send Jesus back. He promises that in the beginning of Acts chapter 1, verse 11. And also there are warnings in Revelation, which may well be regarded as figurative of the political earth and heavens. But there's also a prophecy in Zechariah of the Mount of Olives splitting, literally. Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst, half going towards the east, half towards the west, or the east-west. So this is a view of the Mount of Olives from Jerusalem. And so east-west, heading east out of Jerusalem would be roughly straight up the middle. So if that happens, that's going to be the earthquake ever. That's what I call your Richter 10 earthquake. It's the Richter scale, which measures earthquake power, as opposed to the an exponential whereby you'd never get an earthquake so powerful that you reach 10. The big ones in San Francisco and places like that have been measured as 9 point something. Tsunami at Japan was less than that. It's quite devastating. So this one is going to be a big one. And if that goes a bit further on from there, where the River Jordan runs through, just to the east of here, that's on the Great Rift Valley, which is a big fault that runs north-south down through the Jordan, Dead Sea, so on down, picks up with the Rift Valley in Africa. It's a long fault line. It's one of these where the plates meet up. So if this goes wallop, how much other are we going to get going all the way around the earth, bringing down all sorts of mounds and edifices? What price the internet still working, satellite navigation and so on. And the warnings are there for us to heed in the Bible. Man's technology can't cover everything. And in reality, God has oversight and control of matters on earth. And that's far more important than any nuclear threat. There is a verse in Revelation where God warns that the nations are going to be very angry at the end, and there'll be a time of judgment coming, and them that fear that God's servants will be rewarded, and those judging will be judged. And in particular, at the end of that verse, God will destroy them which destroy the earth. So when that happens, whose side are you? Thank you for listening. Next week, Wednesday.